rising up in the clouds, but I've always felt that something's missing. That was until I found you right there in the crowd. You came into my life and started a fire. You made me feel like I could touch the sky. Oh, there's nothing missing now that you're my desire. Now all I have to do is to make you mine. 'Cause I know, and you know what we could be. Like a song, like a perfect melody. Baby, don't say you don't believe in me. 'Cause you know, and I know, we're onto something good. You know, and I know, we got something good.
Listen, we do have something good. Y'all should know it by now. Y'all should even know the theme song by now and just be, rocking it out with me when it's time. Because I'm over here, getting it in during the theme song. Like, I don't know, I might keep it and I might have to, I might change it to something else next season. But for this season, listen to me. We are getting down. Look, with they say we're cooking with propane, not just regular vegetable oil. You hear what I'm saying? So today we are going to be talking about a lot of really good legal family planning estate kind of information here. And I need you all to get your pen and paper because we have a subject matter expert in the house today. And you know how we do: like, share, comment. If we can get to questions at the end, we will come over there and address a few of them. But for now, we just want you to be able to get all the information you can. Conversations with Kim is always giving up good information, bringing on the subject matter experts just for you, because in the village, it takes all of us to make this thing happen. So without any further delay, let me go ahead and introduce to you our guest for today. Her name is Janetta West, and she is a retired professional from the Xerox Corporation. And she currently is doing contract legal services and very active in her community. Now, listen, I just gave you the highlights because I can't go into all the things that Janetta does. But when she begins to share with you this information, you're going to understand who we have in the village today. Come on and give her some love, Miss Janetta West.
Thank you, Kim.
Hi, Janetta.
Hi, Kim.
So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, we love in the village, we love to have people that are subject matter experts. And clearly, we know that you've been championing this cause for some time now, and just glad that you're here to kind of share some of that wisdom with us.
Okay.
So let's start with, what is the importance of estate planning?
Okay. First, I do want to make a disclaimer up front. I am not an attorney. The information I'm going to give you is, however, based upon working very closely with an estate planning attorney and all the observations that I've seen working with her as a paralegal.
Okay.
So the importance of estate planning, first of all, when you think about death, period, we all have sudden death in our life. But with the pandemic over the last year, a lot of us have experienced sudden death in our family. And that just makes it so important that we have an estate plan together, because when you don't, you lose all information. You may not know what the desires of the deceased is. You may not know all the assets and the property. So it just puts us in precarious position when we, have someone close to us who passes and they don't have an estate in place.
And so when you say an estate, can you kind of define that word estate for those who may not be familiar with it?
Okay, great. Yeah, when we talk about estate, we're talking about documents that you have in place that are there for the event of a death. It also could be documents that are utilized when someone becomes incapacitated or ill or disabled. So typically an estate plan for most of us would consist of a will, which we all know that's a written document where a individual specifies the beneficiaries and the property and the assets and how they would like those assets disposed of once they're deceased. So a will is very important, but also very important, which a lot of people don't think about, is not only do we have death, but we could have sudden illness, incapacitation, disablement, such that that person is no longer able to make decisions. And so there are a set of power of attorney documents that allows close family members to help make those decisions. And really, there are three medical power of attorneys and one that's financial. First, there's a medical power of attorney where it specifies someone who can make healthcare decisions for someone who's become incapacitated. Then there's also what's called a directive to the physician. And this is very important because it allows your loved ones to, and yourself, to make those decisions prior to any incident on how you want your medical care handled. So you guys have probably heard called do not resuscitate. This document directs the doctor whether you want to be, put on life support or what level of life support or what level of Medicare you want in the event you become unable to communicate. So that's a very important document. And then the third medical document, which most people don't know, we have Hipaa laws, which says no one can have access to your information. However, when you become ill or deceased or unable to talk, you want someone in your family, your spouse or your mother or someone, to have access to that information. So there's also a document that's called the Hipaa Authorization that allows them to have access to that information if something happens to you. And then the last important power of attorney document is one that's called a statutory durable power of attorney. And that's giving someone the ability to handle your finances, the care for your family, everything else that needs to be handled besides your health care when you have an event where you're not able to communicate. Okay. So those are the main components, the power of attorney documents and a will that are in an estate.
Okay. So would that cover, let's just say, your car, your jewelry, your clothes, your stocks? Is all of that involved in there?
In a will. So in a will, an individual will specify all of their property, both real property and separate property, all of their assets. So everything that you own, based upon what the person creating the will wants to put in the will, would be included. That's jewelry, those are called personal property like jewelry and cars, and then real property like houses or land, real estate, and also all of your other financial assets like IRAs, 401ks, insurance. All of those could be included in your will.
I think this is such an important topic because I have seen just over the years where someone will, transition unexpectedly,
right?
And there's nothing in place,
right?
And granted, everyone grieves differently, but when you're grieving and you've lost someone very dear to you, you don't know, number one, how you're going to respond. And number two, I feel like it sometimes brings out the worst in people because everyone's grabbing for something, a piece of the pie, especially if that person had means. And it doesn't matter if they were married, if they had children, none of that comes into play, especially if they have siblings. or if they, if they had other relatives or people that were involved in their care.
Yeah.
So, clearly these documents are essential. And a lot of times we don't take out the time to have that conversation, even though we're sitting down at the barbecue and 3 or 4 times a year, everyone gets together, but we're not having real conversations.
Right. And Kim, let me tell you some things that happens when a will is not in place. And you kind of mentioned some of them, but this is why it's so important that you have a will. First thing you talked about is not understanding or knowing what the assets of that person is. But the main thing is the manner in which they want those assets distributed once they die. When a person dies without a will, then there's a lot of things that happen that you're not aware of. A lot of people are not aware of. First of all, access to their finances. If they have bank accounts or insurance policies, even paying bills, and you have no type of documentation that indicates you were the spouse or the survivor of that individual, then you have no proof to give to those organizations to be able to access their accounts. And the medical power of attorney or a will document will do that for you. But this is one of the things that really a lot of people are not aware of. And that's when it comes to beneficiaries. So if you have a loved one who dies without a will, then what takes place is the way those assets will get distributed. First of all, you have to go to court. You have to pay for an attorney to identify an administrator who will help take care of all of the property and the disposition of the property. But when it comes to that property, there are something that are called intestate laws, and they're different for each state that you live in. But the laws of intestacy says who will get the property. So you think if you're a single person and you die and you have no children, then you think, oh, well, my sister's going to get this, or, my friend. You don't know who's going to get that. The laws of intestacy tell you exactly how those properties will be distributed. So when you die and you're unmarried and you have no children, the law says that goes to your parents. All of your assets go to your parents. However, if only one parent is alive, then half of it goes to your parent, that parent that's living. The other half goes to your siblings. And you may or may not wanted that to occur. So those laws are in place for each state. Also, different states have community property laws, and there are different laws about what happens with property when you're in a community property state. So in Texas, where I live, and in the property state says, if you die and you have married, that property will go directly to your spouse. However, if you have children outside of your marriage with your spouse, some of your separate property will go to those children, and your spouse doesn't get everything. So it's things like that when you die without a will and that person has not identified how they want those assets distributed, it could end up going to someone that you don't want it to go to. And it's more expensive. You got to pay court costs. A lot of times all heirs are not clear. You have to go through a process of identifying the heirs. That has to be publicized in papers so we can make sure we have all the heirs. And you have to appoint an attorney that's called an ad litem attorney to identify those heirs. So when you die without a will, it puts a lot of strain and finances on a family.
I've had I'm not going to say opportunity, but I was able to watch from a distance as a friend of mine had to go through probate because there wasn't a will in place. And it was a stressful time trying to legally, I guess, prove or fight or win a battle that legally or rightfully should have been theirs. But because there wasn't anything in place, they had to go through a lot of stuff. And it's exhausting because you've already lost a loved one and now you have to go through this. So, you know, I would say to anyone that is watching this, you know, number one, please share it. But number two, please take action if you haven't already done so to make sure that your business is in order in the event that some unlikely thing happened. And it doesn't always mean that you have transitioned and you've died, but you just could be incapacitated for a little bit sometimes and need someone to take over your affairs. And if you don't have that stuff legally in writing, they're not able to go to the bank. They're not able to go different places and take care of business on your behalf. So some very good information.
Hey, Kim, and I want to say too, for people, even when you have a will, everybody should understand, even though you have a will, you still have to go through a process that's called probate. And probate is a court proceedings where a judge will review the will, review the documentation, and ensure that everything is in place for the executor to distribute that property. And I want to let you know that there are forms online that you can get, will templates, power of attorney templates, but you want to make sure that they're truly valid and that they have all of the right information in them so that the will can't be contested. And that's another thing. People can contest the will unless you have an ironclad will that specifies how any situation like that should occur. So probate is still required, but when you don't have a will, you have to go to court and you'll spend a lot more getting an attorney, going through the administration, the heir searches, all of the things that have to be done when you don't have a will. You'll spend a lot more money there.
And let me just say, you know, we think that people won't protest, but you can put everything in order, and then some, you know, in-law or somebody from your past will, you know, rise up with some authority that they don't have, but just hold up things and make things difficult. So you definitely, like she said, need to have some, and you know, your ironclad documents.
Correct.
Let's try to talk about, you know, the key info in a will.
Okay. So, you know, we've kind of talked about it, but it specifies all of your assets. It identifies all of the assets that you may have, whether that's personal property, real property, and personal things like jewelry, etc. It also specifies who your beneficiaries are, which, as you know, anyone that you want to receive that property and who receives what. Additionally, a key component of a will is identifying the executor. The executor is the individual that you identify who will be responsible for carrying out your wishes in the will. And that can be in and itself a lot of misunderstanding about what the role of an executor is. So you want to be able to speak to someone about what the role is so that when you're choosing an executor, you are choosing the right person who can do that. There may be situations where you have minor children, you have the children that are dependent upon you, or you may have handicapped people, and the goal of the executor is to take care of those people in your will, and that needs to be spelled out. So that's another important component of the will. But there are a lot of clauses in the will that just provide information about what the role of the executor is, what should happen with the will. As we talked about, clauses that specify if anyone wants to contest the will, what should happen in that case. And at the end, the witnesses, the affidavits, the proving information that says you are who you are, those are all of the components that you want to make sure are in a will. Mm-hmm. So again, there are documents online, and at the end, I'm going to talk about where to go get them. but many times they don't have all of those ironclad clauses that you would want in your will.
And I think that even in the will, when it pertains to, property rather, sometimes we say that, oh, the house will go to my spouse or the house will go to my children and, they'll have equal shares in it. But we don't necessarily say this house will not be sold. This house will remain a family home. And I've allocated, there might be a portion of the funds allocated towards taxes or repairs. But, those are things that you really have to think about now if you want your legacy to continue to go on. Is that right, Janetta?
That's correct. And the will allows you to identify all those things. One thing I want to tell you, one thing I've seen a lot of times, especially for people that live in Texas where land is more abundant, and we have people who are farmers or sharecroppers that have land, we found a lot of instances where you may have had access to land, but not only land, you have access to oil rights. And sometimes that is not spelled out specifically in a will, and it may require, we've had to do additional research in the records to find out that you have oil rights. You should be getting royalty from those oil rights. So it's that kind of, detailed information that if it's not specified by the decedent, then that's other information that you may need to have researched.
Okay. Okay, so we still have a few more points to go over, but this is so good. Let's talk about trust and the passing on of family wealth.
Okay, great. Yeah, so a trust, many of us are not as familiar with trust. It happens typically in our minds of families of wealth, and it's used to pass on wealth. But let me tell you the key things about a trust and the value of a trust for us. I talked about in a will that even if you have a will, you still have to go to court. You still have to go through a probate process in order for that will to be executed. With a trust is a document similar to a will that identifies all your property, your assets, your beneficiary, your designations, and it does not have to go through a probate process. So in a trust, you identify, similar to an executor, you identify a trustee who will take over managing your assets, your estate upon your death. However, when you're alive, you are the trustee for that trust, and then it passes on to a trustee. Some of the things and the reason people use trust, number one, I talked about not having to go to probate. Mm-hmm. Number two, assets in a trust provide liability protection for you. Let's say, for instance, you have a business, and let's say you have a lot of land, you have large sums of 401ks, and someone has an accident or someone is suing your business, and they want to come after you and sue you for all your assets. Your assets that are in a trust are protected, so they cannot go for you and garnish those assets inside of a trust. So that's one reason for doing it. Another reason is transferring family wealth and tax implications. So you may be in a well-situated family, and your children, as they get older, may already be well-situated, but you still want them to inherit your estate or your assets. In a trust, you can set it up where they do not get those assets until a time in which it's beneficial to them from a tax standpoint. So it also allows you to carry on the family in the future, allowing you to specify how your grandchildren will be provided for, how when that money will be transferred to them. So it's allowing you to plan your estate out in a more structured format and allowing you, again, those tax liability savings, transfer of wealth, and at the point of death, no one has to go to court. That trust is in effect immediately the day that you die. A trust, you can put everything you own in a trust, whether it's property, homes, insurance, IRAs, 401ks, jewelry, everything in there. You can put that in your trust, and you can have your family live a normal life without having to go through probate process at the point of death. So that's one of the abilities of a trust.
Now, just hearing how you explain that, that seems to be the most effective and easy way to make sure that your final wishes are carried out.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and a trust, it may cost a little, I want to let you know, it will cost a little bit more upfront, but it just provides a longer term detailed breakdown of how your estate and how your wealth is passed on through your family.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you just can't, not take advantage of tax benefits and the liability of all of your assets being protected within a trust.
Well, listen, if you haven't got your income tax check yet, then you already know what you should be doing with it. That's all I'm saying.
That's a great idea.
In our final minutes, let's talk about resources for estate planning.
Yeah, so I wanted to say, and I've said this, there are resources that you can go online, and it depends upon, what's the depth of your estate. For a general form to do your will and your power of attorney, typically you can just go on Google or go on Bing and say, templates for a will or templates for power of attorney. The most complete documents I've seen, however, are if you go to the state law library of your state. So for the state of Texas, go to the law library there, and they will typically have the legal forms, templates that you can utilize in developing, your will or power of attorney. A trust has to be done by an attorney. You wouldn't do a trust by yourself. And I do want to say, there are scenarios where you can do your own will, but if you have complex situations where you have multiple assets, those assets against multiple states, large amounts of property, land with mineral rights and oil rights, in those scenarios, you really do want to consult with an attorney to have a will or a trust completed for you. Also, the bar had done a program, and I need to make sure it's still valid, but they were doing a program for COVID first responders, and that's on the bottom of your screen. And they put out in place all of the key documents that you might utilize in the event of a sudden death. And they were also giving some advice. So you can check that site out, but also, like I said, go online, Google the state bar for your state or just will templates. And then Kim knows me. I have some resources, the attorney that I works with, who's also eligible to help you do a will.
Okay. Well, Janetta, that has been very informative. I knew quite a bit of it, but a lot of it I wasn't really clear on. So thank you so much for coming into the village, educating us, giving us resources. I think that link should be posted in the chat for you now, so it'll become a live link for you all. And then Janetta's information there is on the screen. But if you have any questions, please just go ahead and put them into the comments. I'll be sure that, we circle back and address them on an individual level if you do have direct questions. So any final words, Janetta?
No, I just, abhor you to really think about this. With the way things are happening in the world today, it's important that we each have an estate plan to just take care of ourselves and take care of our families.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We definitely got to get you back,
Okay.
So thank you. And I'll be talking to you soon.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All righty. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Listen, Village, that was phenomenal. And so many times we are not taking care of the stuff that we need to have taken care of. We're having conversations, we're playing board games, spades, and horseshoes or whatever else y'all doing on the holidays. I don't know. But while you barbecuing, put that table together for business and let's get these things in order and make sure that your house is in order. So next week, we're going to be talking about survival in your home, in your car, and your evacuation kit. So we got some good information coming for you. Come back and talk and visit with us. And just remember that silence creates distance, but conversations with Kim builds the village. Bye-bye.